Yeah, for sure. This is the perfect way to finish off the episode by talking about some power rankings, baby. Everyone loves when we do this. So let's just go. We've obviously got 12 teams. It's relatively clear cut. We're going to go from D to S. So everyone's consistent over. I can make the graphics and so it can be so they're not too skewed. So I guess I'll go through my initial thoughts. I'll throw it over to you guys to run through what you're thinking, where you would change things up. Because I imagine most people are in a similar boat here, but it's somewhat tough to say. I guess I'll start at the top firstly with I just think FaZe should be in a tier of their own. I think like I'd either give them like an SS tier or just like the S tier, or like S plus tier or whatever, and just have FaZe. Because the thing is, even though FaZe have been tested, they've been tested a few times, they're always the team that's there. This is the thing with this squad. It's not like there's teams that can compete with FaZe. Dallas did it. Toronto have done it. New York have beaten them twice, the only team to beat them twice this entire season. So there's teams that can beat FaZe. But the problem is that if there's one team that's always going to be in the finals, it's FaZe, right? And obviously they've won 3 out of 4 events. There's going to be discussion if you guys continue on doing this next season. Like, if next season the game's different and you guys are still winning championships, like the dynasty conversation kicks in. So I think Atlanta have to be S tier. After that, it gets interesting to me. I think I'm not sure who to put second actually, because even though Dallas outplays Toronto here, I think Dallas and Toronto to me are the 2 A tier teams. I'm going to put New York lower. I'll explain, I guess, in a second. But I mean, Dallas and Toronto, interesting spot. I don't know who's better. Dallas beat them here at the end, but then they lost to them earlier on. They kind of got bodied on a couple of maps. I feel like online, I might actually favour Toronto, but then going to the stage 5 major, I think that Dallas are going to be more of a threat. So for that reason, I'm giving Dallas a slight edge in second, but I think both of them are right now A tier, the closest challengers to FaZe. New York, I'm putting in B just because despite having a good initial stage 3 with a seam, they just got pretty much taken apart by Toronto at the end of that stage. And even with Decimate in, they looked a little bit questionable. And I think they've had a difficult time. All the other squads at the top have had time to keep improving, and New York haven't had that opportunity without being able to play with a seam on land. So I think that's going to hold them back a little bit here. So I'm putting them in B with OpTic, which I think is OpTic have got to be 5th, I think, for most people's estimations right now. It's tough to put them anywhere else. Then Florida, then we move into the C tier. So Florida, Minnesota, and then Thieves I put down at the bottom of that kind of C tier. I still think they can be a team that competes, but right now I think you've got to put them behind Florida and Minnesota because those 2 teams have shown promise to be able to beat the B tier teams at the very least, or at least get up in the mix with those squads. And then I've just got 4 teams in D. Seattle are top in the list there. I think I've got Paris right after that. Then I've got London, then LAG. I don't really know exactly how to order these teams all the way at the bottom. It's somewhat tough to do. So I think Seattle have shown the most promise out of them as of late. But at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter how you order those teams because they're not making it to champs anyway. So yeah, that's my list. I think I imagine you guys are somewhat similar, but definitely in terms of the tiering, you can definitely switch some things up. I guess I'll throw it to Austin first.
Okay, so to start off with the S tier, I was going to put my own team up there. Won 3 out of the 4 majors coming in. You know, even though we're not at Final Forum, we still scraped it out. I still think we're going to be a major threat for Stage 5. My Tier A has 3 teams in it. It's super hard to call, honestly, for me. They all have their different strengths and weaknesses. To start off, for number 2, I have Toronto. I feel like their strength is that they are very, very good at S&D and control, which other than our team, no other team is good at both of those modes and can be really reliable at winning those in a series. And I feel like that propels them to be good at not only best of 9s, which their huge map pool helps tremendously, but they're also really a big threat in best of 5s because there's obviously 2 S&Ds control that they can rely on winning. Number 3, I have New York still. With Asem in the lineup, they're a huge threat. They're going to be one of the top hardpoint teams no matter what. I know they just went 0-5 without him, but that just shows how important he is to winning for that squad. They need to improve control. Control's their major weakness. If they're losing control and S&Ds to all the top teams, they're not winning a championship. So they need to improve that, and I really feel like that's going to be like their target for this next stage. And then finally, I have Dallas. So going back to stage 2 when Toronto beat us, I will say the same thing for Dallas. Consistency. Show us that this past weekend was not a fluke, which I don't think it was. I love the way this team plays, as I talked about their fundamentals earlier. But show us the consistency to do this week in and week out. I'm sure they're going to come in and compete, but I want to see them just a couple more reps of just doing what they need to do, and maybe not relying so much on the fundamentals, but still showing us some of that star power. And in the B tier, I also have 3 teams. I'm going to start off with Chicago. Chicago obviously has all the talent in the world, but we're in a league where every team has talent, and they need to show not only the consistency to compete against the top teams, but also getting themselves out of a tough spot. Like they need to show us that that gutsy, just I'm able to punch back kind of mode that we just haven't seen yet this year. Florida, I think is improving ever since stage 1. They've improved every single stage. I have them still behind Chicago, but they're kind of entering that stage where I think they can be a dark horse in every tournament that they're in. Minnesota is right behind them. I do think Minnesota is the gatekeeper to the tier 1. I call it kind of. They're going to be the last team I have in tier B. They're good enough to compete against all the teams above them, but they can still struggle against them, and they still kind of struggle against the teams below them. It's kind of just like a mixed bag of what you're going to get. The C tier is they should be good, but we just haven't seen it consistent throughout the year. So I have LA Thieves and Seattle. Seattle obviously had really good performances on LAN, but then lost to a team that's better than them, which is fine at the end of the day. But where's that consistency? Is it going to be? Are you just going to die off now for the rest of the stage now that it's back online and then show up again on LAN? Or are you going to build off of that performance? And then LA Thieves, they have a ton of star power, but again, everyone has star power in this league. Are your fundamentals going to be correct? Are you going to be able to thrive and build and then be that threat for the entire stage? And then finally, I have D tier, which is Paris, London, and Lag. They pretty much all have some strength. Like Paris is pretty good at hard point. They're a threat in that. London, they have the aggression to match anybody. So if people are giving them the free kills, they're gonna be able to turn that free kill into 2 and 3 and build off of that. And then LAG is they're a threat at S&D. So they each have their strengths, but they just have too many weaknesses to consistently compete against the teams that are above them.
Yeah, my list is pretty much the same. In S tier, I've got a Paris Legion. I've got Atlanta in S tier. A tier, I think it's a little bit different. I think right now I'd put Dallas at number 1 because out of those 3 teams of Toronto, New York, and Dallas in that A tier, I think Dallas has the biggest room to improve because they are a fresher team than these other 2 teams. And Vivid's only getting better. All these players are finally finding their confidence. And I think pushing FaZe to a round 10, game 9 is such a big confidence booster. And I think mainly for Crim as well, because he played so well, all super consistent, all major. Yeah, and he was really that factor that switched up the vibe within that team, and it seems like they're really on a roll. So I put them at the top in A. I put Toronto second because they are so good. We just know that. New York I put last in their A tier because they spent the last week or 2 without one of their best players. They didn't play with them on LAN, so it's going to be a new experience when they come around to it in stage 5. And so I wonder if they're really going to be firing on all cylinders when they first start out. I think they'll get there, but it'll take a little bit longer than the other 2 teams. So I go Dallas, Toronto, New York. B tier is the same as you. I've got Chicago at the top because I think out of those B teams, Chicago, Florida, and Minnesota, they have the highest ceiling. So right now, but Florida is scary because they can just come out and be one of the best teams in the game. Minnesota, I think, last in that B tier. Same with C, LAT, and Seattle. Seattle show that on LAN they're a completely different team. Not entirely different, but they show that they can be a lot better on LAN. And Thieves, we haven't really seen the potential of that core 4 that they tried to put together. They've obviously lost every series with that team, but who knows? They could come out and actually be really solid. And then D, the trash tier are just bad. So there you go.
That's
and
awesome. Yeah.
And then D tier is Paris, London, LAG. Those guys, not it, mate.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good point about Seattle, actually, because I kind of put them into D without really thinking too much about it. But in fairness, they did comfortably beat 2 teams in D tiers. They may well deserve to be above them. I'm still going to keep them down there just to stick to my guns. But also just because, I don't know, I just wanted to see him do it online in a way. It's kind of funny because we always talk about seeing them do it on LAN, but unfortunately online makes them a massive part of this league. So I want to see if they can actually look better than the trash tier, as you so eloquently described, Lion, when they're playing online, right, in this upcoming stage. We'll see, obviously, because it's Octane dropped a 1.7 and a 1.6. Right? I don't I think there's going to be some regression to the mean that maybe he doesn't do quite as well. We'll see. And of course, that's